when you're doing a quotient, when you're doing the division, you have to be careful about considering all the values that will be restrictions on the domain. So let's start by doing f divided by g of x. So that means that we'll have to divide x plus 1 divided by 2x plus 4, everything divided by x minus 3 over x minus 2. Now, once again, if you remember, dividing by 0 is not a possibility. This is the denominator, this is the numerator, this is another numerator, this is the denominator, and this whole thing is a numerator, and this whole thing is a denominator. So we are going to save all the denominators from turning into 0 and perhaps saving a fairy. So we're going to end up having as 2x plus 4 has to be different than 0. Also, that's the first denominator. The next one is x minus 2, different than 0. And lastly, this whole thing will be considered a denominator, the denominator of that big numerator over here. So x minus 3 over x minus 2, different than 0. So that would make our first restriction. We're going to have 2x is equal to minus 4. So x, well, it has to be different than minus 2. The next one, x has to be different than 2. And lastly, if you notice, this x minus 2 is going to end up multiplying a 0. So x minus 3 has to be different than the 0 that we already have times x minus 2. So that whole thing will become a 0. X minus 3 different than 0, so x different than 3. So we're going to have minus 2, 2, and 3 as our restrictions. So let's write the domain, and then we'll complete the previous answer. So we always start from left to right. So we're going to go from minus infinity. The first one that we're going to meet is the minus 2. Then from minus 2 to 2. And then from 2 to 3. And finally from 3 to infinity. And now we can actually do the division. So you're going to end up with x plus 1 times x minus 2 divided by 2x plus 4 times x minus 3, and we can leave it there. Now, if you do the opposite operation, you are going to expect to have that same answer, but we're going to flip the numerator and denominator. So you're going to have 2x plus 4 times x minus 3 divided by x plus 1 times x minus 2. But as you know, that won't tell us the whole story. So we have to just consider the denominators that came along the way. So if we're doing g divided by f, that's x minus 3 divided by x minus 2 divided by x plus 1 divided by 2x plus 4. So that's that. We're going to divide like that, but what we want to do first is locate all the denominators. So numerator by denominator, numerator by denominator, and big numerator, big denominator. So let's use all the denominators we can find. X minus 2 different than 0, x different than 2. The next one is 2x plus 4 different than 0. We already know that this will produce a minus 2. And finally, this whole thing right there. So x plus 1 divided by 2x plus 4 different than 0, so that will produce a minus 1. So our zeros, the values that would produce 0 are those three. So that means that we're gonna start from minus infinity, then we're gonna go end up at minus 2, then from minus 2 to minus 1, and from minus 1 to 2, and from 2 to infinity. And if you notice, some people ask why the minus 1. Well, if you substitute the minus 1, it's going to be minus 1 and minus 3 divided by minus 1 and minus 2 divided by minus 1 plus 1 divided by 2 times minus 1 plus 4. Doesn't matter what happens with all of those, we're going to end up with minus 4, then minus 3 divided by 0, and then 2 times minus 1, that's minus 2, plus 2, that's 2. So this whole thing is going to end up as 0. So we're going to end up with, or if you do the operation, either way, minus 4 times 2 and minus 3 times 0, either way, you're going to end up with a 0 in the denominator. So that's why we need to also exclude the minus 1. And finally, if you're asked to do G over F with an input of 3, we already know what G divided by F looks like. And if you plug a 3, you just have to take this one. So that's why sometimes it's better to leave your answer like this. And you're going to do 2 times 3 plus 4, and then 3 minus 3 divided by 3 plus 1, and 3 minus 2. And you have to be aware of the fact that you have a 0 here. It will make the whole difference, and that's why on this one we're not excluding the 3, because on this one 3 is not allowed, and if you were to use a 3, you were gonna end up with a undefined answer. But here you can try to do the whole thing, but you're gonna end up with whatever's inside of that parenthesis, the 2 times 3 plus 4, multiplying a 0, and whatever is happening here times whatever is happening here doesn't really matter at this point, because 0 times whatever comes out of there is going to be 0. And whatever you end up having in the denominator won't matter, because 0 divided by anything will be 0. So save yourself some time if you're able to get a 0 out there. If you end up with something else, you would have to do the whole thing.